My name is Sophie Anderson, and at 28, I thought I had already survived the worst thing a parent could do to a child. 10 years earlier, my father had stood in the doorway of his house, arms crossed, face cold, and told me I had two options: obey him completely or get out. When I didn't back down, he handed me a suitcase and a black trash bag and said, "You'll learn how the real world works." That was the last day he called me his daughter. For the next decade, he didn't help with rent. He didn't ask if I was eating. He didn't care that I slept on a friend's couch while working double shifts to stay in college. So when I walked into the conference room for my grandmother's will reading, the last person I expected to see was him. And yet there he was, sitting at the polished table like nothing had ever happened. Relaxed, confident, smiling, as if he hadn't erased me from his life 10 years earlier. He looked up, met my eyes, and grinned like we were sharing a private joke. "This is good, kiddo," he said quietly, leaning toward me just enough that only I could hear. "Grandma's lodge is worth at least $1.36 million. We'll turn it into a real family business together." The word "together" landed harder than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. Together after he disowned me. Together after a decade of silence. Together now that money was involved. And that's when I realized something chilling. He didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as a problem that had suddenly turned into an opportunity. The only reason I was even alive enough to sit in that room was because of one person, my grandmother, Dorothy. She was the one who taught me how to scrub floors not as punishment, but as pride. Who slipped cash into an envelope and called it emergency cookie money when she knew my bank account was empty. Who looked me straight in the eyes and said, "If he throws you away, I'll keep you." When she died, she left a hole in my life that no inheritance could ever fill. Weeks after her funeral, an official letter arrived, summoning me to the reading of her will. I knew she owned a lodge on Willow Creek Mountain, our lodge, but I never imagined it was worth over $1 million. And I never imagined the man who abandoned me would walk in acting like a loving father, already planning how to divide her legacy. As the judge shuffled papers and cleared his throat, a cold certainty settled in my chest. Whatever my grandmother had written in that will, it wasn't going to be the family reunion my father thought it would be. And when the final words were read out loud, they would either save me or destroy him. And sitting across that table, watching his smile widen with every second, I wondered something that made my stomach tighten. Why was he so sure he was about to win? The conference room felt too small for the history sitting inside it. The judge took his seat at the head of the polished table, papers stacked with obsessive precision. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, the kind of place where lives get rearranged with signatures instead of raised voices. On one side sat my father, James Anderson, already leaning back like he owned the room. Next to him, my mother, Linda, rigid and silent, hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. And beside her, my sister Hannah, perfectly dressed, scrolling her phone like this was just another business meeting she expected to dominate. Across from them sat me and my grandmother's longtime attorney, Mr. Thompson. No hugs. No condolences. No acknowledgement of the decade that had passed since my father decided I didn't exist. The judge cleared his throat. "We are here to formalize the last will and testament of Dorothy Anderson." Before anyone else could speak, my father nodded sharply. "All parties present, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "We're eager to honor my mother's legacy as a united family." United. The word echoed in my head like a bad joke. The last time I'd seen him before the funeral, he'd been screaming at me to get out of his house, accusing me of betrayal because I wouldn't drop college to work for him full-time. United wasn't what we were. It was what he wanted to look like. My mother never looked at me. Her eyes stayed locked on a spot on the wall, as if meeting my gaze might crack something she'd spent years holding together. Hannah finally glanced up, eyes sliding over me with a mixture of curiosity and contempt, like I was a competitor she hadn't bothered to research yet. Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses and gave me the briefest nod. Not reassurance, just truth. This will hurt, but it's necessary. As he began reading, small bequests passed by charities, distant cousins, sentimental items. My father's fingers tapped the table in an impatient rhythm, the smile on his face stretching thinner by the second. He hadn't come here for memories. He'd come for control. I caught a whisper as he leaned toward Hannah. We'll make sure that sound mind phrase doesn't stand. My stomach tightened. That was the plan. Paint Grandma as confused. Frame the will as emotional. Turn her love into legal weakness. They weren't here to grieve her. They were here to erase her final decision. Hannah checked her phone again, screen glowing briefly before going dark, like she already knew the outcome and was bored waiting for it to arrive. I kept my face still and repeated one thought over and over like armor. Grandma knew exactly who they were, and she knew exactly who I was. But one question kept pulsing beneath the surface. If my father had disowned me, if he hadn't cared whether I survived, why was he sitting there so confident? Why did he look like a man who already knew how this story ended? And as Mr. Thompson's voice slowed, shifting in tone, I felt the entire room subtly change. Even the judge straightened in his chair. Because we were finally approaching the part of the will that mattered. And whatever was coming next was about to expose who this family really was, and who my grandmother had trusted when it counted. Mr. Thompson's voice slowed just enough that everyone felt it. And now, he said, we come to the disposition of the primary asset. The room went still. Even the faint hum of the overhead lights felt louder than before. The mountain lodge located on Willow Creek Mountain, he continued, currently appraised at approximately $1,360,000. The number didn't just hang in the air. It pressed down. Hannah snapped upright in her chair like she'd been shocked. My father's tapping fingers stopped mid-motion. My mother's eyes finally left the wall and landed on me. $1.36 million. I knew the lodge was valuable, but hearing it spoken out loud turned it into something else entirely. Not a home, not a memory. A weapon. Mr. Thompson kept reading. In respect to the lodge, Dorothy Anderson writes, "This lodge is my life's work, my refuge, and my apology to my granddaughter." My throat tightened. An apology. She had never needed to apologize to me, but she knew someone else should have. I bequeath full operational control and beneficial interest of the lodge, he read, to my granddaughter, Sophie Anderson, under the following conditions. My father exhaled sharply, already smiling. He placed a hand over his chest, performing a motion like a man who thought the ending was already written. That's wonderful, he said, turning toward me. See, she wanted you to have it. We'll help you run it, sweetheart. Mr. Thompson's voice cut through him, calm but firm. I'm not finished. The judge raised a hand for silence. My father's smile froze. Condition 1, Mr. Thompson continued. For a minimum period of 5 years, the lodge shall not be sold, leased, mortgaged, or transferred without the explicit written consent of Sophie Anderson. A muscle jumped in my father's cheek. Hannah's lips parted slightly, like she hadn't processed what she'd just heard. Condition 2, Mr. Thompson said. No family member, including James Anderson, Linda Anderson, or Hannah Anderson, shall exercise managerial authority or make binding operational decisions without the express approval of Sophie Anderson. The silence that followed was heavy. My father let out a short, bitter laugh. "She's joking," he muttered. "She must be joking." Mr. Thompson didn't react. "Condition 3, he said evenly. Should any family member attempt to contest this will, challenge Sophie Anderson's authority, or undermine her operational independence, the lodge shall be immediately transferred in its entirety to the charity Haven for Youth." Hannah gasped. My mother shut her eyes. And my father went completely still. Not angry. Not loud. Still. For the first time since I'd walked into that room, the confidence drained from his face. "That's insane," he snapped. "My mother loved this family. She wouldn't threaten to give everything away to strangers." Mr. Thompson slid a document forward. "This clause was drafted by Mrs. Anderson herself," he said calmly. "Reviewed multiple times. She was entirely lucid." I stared at the page. My grandmother's signature was there, firm, unmistakable. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. She hadn't just given me the lodge. She'd handed me a line in the sand and dared my father to cross it. And as I met his darkening stare across the table, one question burned louder than any number ever could. Was he really willing to lose everything, just to prove he still controlled me? Because the moment we walked out of that room, my father stopped pretending this was about family and made it very clear he was ready to turn it into a war. The formal reading ended, but the real fight began the moment we stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, sterile glow that made every expression too sharp to hide behind. The walls echoed with footsteps and muffled voices from other offices, but around us, everything felt suspended, like the air itself was holding its breath. Hannah stormed ahead, her heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. My mother lingered behind, clutching her handbag as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. And my father blocked my path. He stepped directly in front of me with the practiced ease of a man who had spent his life stopping people from walking away. "We need to talk," he said, voice low but carrying. I folded my arms. Reality just talked, it signed papers. His smile was thin, stretched tight without warmth. "Reality," he said, "is that you have no idea how to run a property worth over $1 million. There it was. Not concern. Not advice. Control. You've never managed staff," he continued. "You don't understand marketing, maintenance, bookings. You're emotional, sentimental. You will drown in responsibility." I met his eyes. "Good thing I learned how to swim when you threw me out." His jaw tightened. "Don't start with that," he snapped. "You were rebellious, you chose to leave." Funny how, in his version, he hadn't forced me out. I'd simply wandered off. "You disowned me," I said steadily. "You told me I wasn't your daughter anymore." He waved a hand. "Words said in anger. Families fight. This is bigger than old drama. This is generational wealth." Hannah spun back toward us, irritation flashing across her face. "This isn't complicated," she said. "You sign a few papers, give us equal say, and we turn the lodge into a luxury resort. Investors are already interested." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You were planning this before Grandma was even buried." She scoffed. "You think your little memories with her are worth more than real money." "They built the lodge," I shot back, "while you ignored her calls." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice to something almost intimate. "If you try to do this alone, you will fail. And when you come crawling back, it will be too late." The old fear tried to surface. The night's counting dollars. The silence after the door slammed behind me 10 years ago. But something else stood taller now. "It wasn't you who kept me alive," I said. "It was her." His charm vanished. "You're making a mistake you can't undo," he hissed. "You think that charity clause scares me. I will fight you." "I think," I replied, "that's exactly what she was counting on." For a moment, we stood there, his threat hanging between us, my defiance solidifying into something unmovable. Then he leaned in, almost nose to nose. "If you turn this into a war," he said, "don't cry when you lose everything. Not just the lodge, your reputation, your future." He walked away, Hannah at his side, their silhouettes retreating down the corridor like a warning. My mother hesitated behind them, eyes wet, mouth trembling. She didn't say a word. She just followed. I stood there alone, heart pounding, the echo of his threat replaying in my head. Was that a warning from a father? Or a declaration of war from a man who couldn't stand losing control? Because that same night, instead of backing down, I made a decision that would force him to make his first real move. I drove up to Willow Creek Mountain that same evening. The road twisted higher with every mile, trees closing in on both sides like they were guarding something sacred. By the time I reached the final bend, the lodge came into view, quiet, weathered, and stubbornly standing, just like the woman who built it. For a moment, I stayed in the car. Not because I was afraid, but because the weight of it finally landed. This place wasn't just wood and land anymore. It was a line drawn in ink and law and blood. I unlocked the door with the key that was now legally mine. The hinges creaked softly, the sound echoing through the empty rooms. The air smelled like pine cleaner and old coffee, familiar in a way that wrapped around my chest. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. I didn't start with spreadsheets or legal documents. I started with a corkboard. I pinned up photos, families laughing by the fire pit, kids running across the lawn, couples watching sunsets from the balcony. On blank cards, I wrote down things Grandma used to say. People don't come here for perfection. They come here to remember they're still alive. Then I started planning. Family weekends. Quiet retreats. Off-season packages to keep the lodge breathing year-round. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been yelling in that hallway. This was something sharper. If my father wanted control, I would give him success he couldn't touch. A knock sounded at the door. Mark stepped inside, shaking snow from his jacket, eyes scanning the corkboard. He'd been my friend since college, the one who once paid my phone bill with his grocery money because he was tired of my number getting disconnected. "So this is the war room," he said. I laughed for the first time all day. "Grandma left me the lodge," I told him, "and a clause that hands it to charity if my family pushes too hard." His eyebrows shot up. "That's diabolical." She knew him. Mark leaned closer, studying the board. "Then we make this place so solid that when he comes for it, he slams into a wall of fully booked weekends and glowing reviews." We got to work. Local contractors fixed the roof. Plumbing got updated. Rooms were refreshed without erasing their soul. I turned a storage room into a small library, board games, kids' books, a place to slow down. Mark helped me throw together a simple website, then convinced me to film a shaky phone video explaining what Grandma's lodge meant to me. It wasn't polished. It was honest. And somehow it worked. Bookings trickled in, then filled weekends. They left notes about peace, nostalgia, and how the place felt like visiting a favorite grandparent. Every good review felt like another brick laid between my father and this place. But peace never lasts when someone thinks you stole something from them. I heard the rumors at the grocery store. She's in over her head. James is just protecting what's his. That girl won't last 6 months. One night, sitting on the porch after the last guests left, doubt finally crept in. What if they're right? I asked Mark quietly. What if I fail and prove him right about me? Mark didn't even look at me. He didn't disown you because you failed, he said. He disowned you because you wouldn't obey. I swallowed. Failure would make him right, he continued. Success will drive him insane. Choose. I didn't hesitate. Success. He nodded. Good, because he won't stay quiet much longer. And he didn't, because just weeks later, my phone rang with a call that confirmed the war had officially begun. The call came late at night. An unknown number. Miss Anderson, a calm, clipped voice asked. This is Attorney Collins representing James and Hannah Anderson. I felt a chill run down my spine. They were officially moving to contest the will. They believe your grandmother's mental capacity was compromised, he continued. We are requesting an emergency hearing regarding the lodge. I didn't sit. I didn't even breathe. I just knew the war had started. Mark was at my side within the hour, laptop under his arm, expression tense. We knew this was coming, he said. We just didn't know when. We immediately split into 2 battles. One, running the lodge, keeping guests happy, fixing roofs, updating rooms, and making sure the place ran smoothly. 2, building a legal fortress around Grandma's will. Medical records, written statements, emails, and longtime family friends, every piece that proved her clarity, her intent, and her foresight. Mr. Thompson worked tirelessly. Dorothy anticipated this, he said one night. That's why she recorded the signing of the final will herself. We watched it together. Grandma appeared on the video, thinner, older, but sharp-eyed and defiant. If my son ever claims I didn't know what I was doing, she said, eyes twinkling at the camera, you tell him I knew exactly what he was doing since he was 16. I laughed through tears. She was calling him out, from beyond the grave. Meanwhile, my father was spinning a different story in town. Church events, business meetings, community gatherings. Sophie's being manipulated, he said to anyone who would listen. Some believed him, some didn't. I could feel it in the way neighbors' smiles stiffened as I passed. The tension wasn't just legal. It was emotional, every conversation a test of loyalty and sanity. At night, I lay awake in the guest rooms, imagining the worst-case scenarios. The lodge taken from me. Father celebrating a legal victory. Grandma's legacy reduced to a spreadsheet. One night, close to midnight, I found my mother sitting at the kitchen table, shadows hiding most of her face. I can't sleep, she whispered. James, he's borrowing money. If he loses, it's not just pride. It could ruin us financially. I nodded slowly. He chose this, I said quietly. He's gambling everything to get what Grandma didn't want him to have. She looked at me, a flicker of the woman I knew returning. You sound like her, she said softly. And in that moment, I understood something critical. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was a test of courage. Who had the nerve to stand up to the family, to speak the truth, and protect Grandma's vision, no matter what? The next morning, the courthouse doors opened, and everything escalated faster than I ever imagined. My father had a plan, and it didn't include me surviving it. The morning of the emergency, hearing dawned gray and cold. I wore my simplest outfit, a black dress, a blazer, and the old silver necklace Grandma had given me at 16. Mark drove, calm as ever. Remember, he said, this isn't about being perfect. It's about proving you were trusted and she had every right to. Walking into the courthouse, everything felt exposed, too bright, too public. My father sat at the plaintiff's table, expensive suit, confident posture, like he already owned the room. Hannah scrolled through her phone, barely paying attention, while their lawyer arranged papers with meticulous precision. My mother sat behind them, silent, eyes downcast. On our side, it was just me, Mr. Thompson, and Mark, our small, determined team. The judge called the session to order. James and Hannah Anderson's lawyer began with a polished, rehearsed story. Grandma had been confused. I was emotionally vulnerable. I had manipulated her into cutting them out. I stayed silent, letting him paint their false narrative. Then my father took the stand. His performance was flawless. Heartbreak, sacrifice, innocence. If I hadn't known him, I might have believed it. Mr. Thompson went next. Quiet, factual. Dates, emails, medical records, and sworn statements, all proving Grandma's clarity and intent. Then it was my turn. I walked up, legs heavy, heart pounding. Hand on the Bible, I spoke clearly. I described the years with Grandma, the lodge's history, and the lessons she taught me about responsibility, pride, and love. I repeated her words about the will. If your father wants the lodge, he'll have to want you first, and if he can't, he gets nothing. The courtroom murmured. A subtle shift, doubt creeping into my father's confident mask. Cross-examination came next. Isn't it true you have unresolved anger toward your father? Yes, I admitted, but my anger didn't write the will. Grandma did. The tension built, every witness, every document, every word stacking against my father's narrative. Then came the video. Grandma herself, addressing the camera with that sharp wit. Tell him I knew exactly what he was doing, she said. I fought back tears. She had prepared for this. Every detail, every clause, every risk planned. The courtroom was silent, but the stakes felt like lightning. And just when it seemed the fight might tip in their favor, my mother took the stand, and everything changed in an instant. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with expectation. When Mr. Thompson called my mother to the stand, I felt my chest tighten. She looked fragile, but every step she took toward the witness box was deliberate, a quiet rebellion against years of silence. Mrs. Anderson, Mr. Thompson began gently, you witnessed many conversations between your mother-in-law and the family. Can you tell the court what you observed about her mental state when she discussed her will? Her hands trembled slightly, gripping the edge of the podium, but her voice came steady. She was clear, my mother said. Every detail, every instruction, she knew exactly what she wanted. Even when others disagreed, she never wavered. I felt a rush of relief. Grandma's intentions were being defended, not just by me, but by someone who had once followed my father's lead blindly. My father's expression darkened. His confidence faltered for the first time. Dorothy was not manipulated, my mother continued. She knew exactly who would honor her legacy and who would not. She trusted Sophie to protect it. A stunned silence fell over the room. Even Hannah's phone was forgotten. Her mouth opened slightly, disbelief written across her face. The judge leaned forward, attentive. My mother's words carried weight, breaking the rehearsed narrative my father had carefully built. His lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled him. Continue, Mrs. Anderson, he said firmly. She did. Every memory she shared, every instance she recounted, proved my grandmother's clarity and the deliberate nature of her decision. And in that moment, I realized the tide had turned. It wasn't just the will, the evidence, or the legal strategy. It was the truth, finally spoken aloud. But just as relief started to creep in, the defense dropped a shocking piece of evidence that could undo everything. Would Grandma's plan hold, or was the fight far from over? The courtroom felt like it had shrunk around me. Every eye was on me, my mother, and Mr. Thompson as the final pieces of evidence were laid bare. The video of Grandma speaking directly to the camera played again. Her sharp eyes, her wry smile, her voice, calm, firm, unyielding, filled the room. "If my son ever tries to say I didn't know what I was doing," she said, "you tell him I've known exactly what he's doing since he was 16. I swallowed hard, letting her words sink into the hearts of everyone present. My father's face went pale. His rehearsed calm was cracking like thin ice. Then Mr. Thompson presented financial records, showing the risky investments my father had been making, betting on the lodge's equity. The courtroom murmured. Each document, each email, each witness statement painted a picture of calculated greed rather than grief or confusion. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood. I didn't just defend the will, I defended Grandma. I described the hours spent at the lodge, the lessons she had taught me, the way she had trusted me above all others. I spoke about her foresight, her love, and her refusal to let selfishness destroy her legacy. My father's lawyer tried one last cross-examination, pushing the idea that Grandma might have been influenced or confused. I met every question calmly, anchored in the truth that had guided me this entire time. Then the judge leaned back, reviewing the evidence. The silence was unbearable. Every heartbeat sounded louder than the last. Finally, he spoke. "The evidence presented shows that Dorothy Anderson was of sound mind at the time she executed this will. Her intentions are clear, consistent, and corroborated by witnesses and documentation. The petition to contest the will is denied. Operational control of Willow Creek Mountain Lodge remains with Sophie Anderson under the conditions specified." Relief washed over me, sudden and overwhelming. I almost couldn't breathe. And then the judge added, "Furthermore, due to the frivolous and self-serving nature of this challenge, court costs and attorney fees are to be paid by the plaintiffs, James and Hannah Anderson." The room froze. My father's mouth opened, closed, but no words came. Hannah gasped, horrified. Even my mother blinked, stunned. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath of the cold air. Freedom, justice, Grandma's faith in me, it was all intact. But the lesson was clear. Power, patience, and truth had won where anger and greed could not. But just as the lodge seemed safe, I knew one thing for certain. The real challenge had only just begun. Keeping it running, honoring Grandma's legacy, and facing my father's simmering wrath would test me in ways the courtroom never could. The moment I stepped back onto the lodge property, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. The air smelled of pine and old wood polish, the same scent Grandma always insisted on each spring. I paused on the front porch, looking over the valley. The silence was different now. It belonged to me. I had no assistant, no staff yet, no safety net except the confidence Grandma's will gave me. I unpacked boxes slowly, each one a reminder of her trust. Photos of family gatherings, letters she had written me over the years, even her old notebooks filled with ideas for the lodge. Everything was a blueprint for the life she wanted me to protect. Mark arrived just as I was putting the last photo on the corkboard. His grin was steady, but his eyes were sharp. "Looks like the war room just got upgraded," he said. I smiled. It's not just a war room, it's a launch pad. We started small, updating the plumbing, fixing squeaky floorboards, freshening up the rooms without erasing the lodge's character. I pinned calendars for themed weekends, family activities, and quiet retreats. I shot a shaky video tour on my phone, introducing the lodge, my vision, and honoring Grandma's legacy. Bookings began slowly, a trickle at first. A couple celebrating an anniversary, a small family reunion, a group of friends escaping the city for a weekend. Each guest left notes that made my chest swell. "Feels like visiting your grandmother, but better Wi-Fi." Every review, every thank you card was a brick in the wall I was building, between the lodge and my father's ambitions. But even as the lodge came alive, I knew he wasn't finished. Rumors started circulating. "She's in over her head," some locals whispered. "The lodge isn't safe. She's being manipulated." I ignored it publicly, but privately my stomach twisted. Mark noticed. "He's trying to shake your confidence," he said. "Don't let him. Remember, the lodge isn't just a building. It's Grandma's plan, your legacy." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the power it carried. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about proving that Grandma had been right about me all along. I wasn't a powerless daughter. I was a protector, a leader, and now, the rightful owner of her legacy. But as bookings grew and the lodge thrived, the first real threat from my father loomed on the horizon. And it was more personal, more ruthless, and far closer than I ever expected.